So now let's go back and deal with Eve. Eve traces to H2332, and then it traces to H2331, and then H2421, and it will give you the names Hawa and Heya. Hawa and Heya. Now both these names are different variations of how to pronounce the name of the Most High. Hawa, Heya. Actually, if you put them both together, Heya and Hawa, you get Ha Yahweh, or the Yahweh, Ha Yahweh. Okay, and that's because Eve represent the feminine principle. She represent the breath. All right, the feminine principle that was breathed into Adam. She represent the life. The word Heya means life. Eve being the mother of all living. Genesis 3:20 says that Adam called her name Eve because she's the mother of all living. Because Eve represent the breath of life. That breath that was breathed into Adam, and each and every person who have that breath is a child of Eve. Right? So she's the mother of all living. Now, I showed how the name Eve, which traces to Hawa and Heya, right, are different variations of the name of the Most High, showing that Eve represent the feminine principle of the Most High. But now let's take this and let's go to Exodus 3:14, when Moses see the burning bush, and the Spirit introduced itself as I am that I am. When you look at that I am, it traces to H1961 Heya. Right? So we see that same Heya that is also defined as I am in Exodus 3:14 is also the same Heya, which is H2421 that's connected to the Eve. But also when you trace, now when you're dealing with this I'm using the Blue Letter Concordance online. When you use it, you go to the I am H1961. It's going to trace you to H1933 and then H183, which is Ava. Ava. And Ava means to fall, lust, want, be greedy, desire, and covet. And what this is showing me is that Ava is the dualistic principle dealing with Eve, but it is the wisdom of the flesh. See, after Eve fell, because Ava means to fall, so after Eve fell in the garden with Adam, she ceased to represent the spirit of the wisdom of the Most High, and she started now to represent the wisdom of man, the wisdom of the flesh, the wisdom of Adam. So Ava meaning to fall, to lust, want, be greedy, desire, or covet. So now we see the dualistic principle. You have Eve representing the wisdom of the Most High, or the wisdom from above, spiritual wisdom. And then you have Ava representing wisdom of the flesh, right? Or carnal wisdom, lust of the flesh. And if you understand the Hebrew, you understand that there's really no vowels, but the A-E-I-O-U, the vowels, they pretty much can be interchangeable because there's no vowels to begin with. So E-V-E-N-A-V-A is basically the same word, the same name. And so now we have Eve here, first representing the wisdom from above. After she fell, she represented Ava, which was the wisdom of the flesh, or the lust of the flesh. Now let's put this to use and see if it worked, because if it's true, we should be able to unravel another mystery. Now when you go to the book of Genesis, the 3rd chapter, 16th verse, what you're going to see is the judgment that was pronounced on woman after the fall, right? So this will be the judgment pronounced on Ava, right? She was Eve, representing the wisdom of the Most High, right? The spiritual principle that was breathed into Adam. But once she fell, she started to be represent Ava, which was the wisdom of the flesh, or the lust of the flesh. And when you look at Genesis 3:16, you'll see that one of the judgments that was passed down on Eve was that, or Ava, is that he will greatly multiply her sorrows and conception. And that first off mean, see, the wisdom of the flesh or carnal wisdom cannot bring forth the Christ. Remember, the woman represents the Holy Spirit, and to be born again means to be born of the Spirit. So, spiritual wisdom is the only wisdom that have the power to bring forth a Christ. Carnal wisdom will not be able to bring forth a Christ. So this is why her sorrow will be greatly multiplied. This is where the barren woman will come in at. Because, a barren woman is someone who's trying to bring forth a child and, she just can't bring him forth, right? She's barren. Her child have to come from a promise. This is shadowing the whole promised seed that was to come. Now, the second part of that is that her desire will be to her husband, and he shall rule over her. Here's wisdom. The reason Adam is supposed to rule over his wife because now she's representing Ava, which represents the lust of the flesh. And it is what man's supposed to do is to keep this flesh in check. And so Adam ruling over his wife or ruling over Ava is symbolically speaking of man ruling over or keeping the lust of his flesh in check. This verse was used to justify men ruling over women, and that's not what this verse is talking about. Now, if you're dealing with the carnal, exoteric definition of the verse, then yeah, I get it. But we're dealing with the mysteries. We're dealing with the spiritual aspect. And so when it says that your desire shall be to your husband, because it's our flesh that lusts and its desires to rule over us. Our flesh is trying to rule over us. So the lust of our flesh is trying to rule over us. That will be the woman's desire being to her husband, and he would have to rule over her in the same light that we are going to have to rule over the lust of our flesh and the desires of our flesh. Another barren woman is Sarah. Now, just like Eve, Sarah's name was changed. Now, it don't show the name change with Eve, but when we go back and look at the name of the Most High, it traced us back to Ava, and it's consistent with what happened with Eve with the fall. And so, but we see with Sarah that her name was changed. Now, Sarah represents Abraham's wisdom, which means Abraham was in possession of two types of wisdom. But both of those wisdoms are represented by Sarah. It's just that when her name changed, the type of wisdom that she represented changed also. So Sarai goes back to H8297, H8269, and H8323, Sar. And it means nobleman, governor, chief, ruler. All right. So this is just a regular or a carnal governor, a landlord, right? A chief, a ruler, nobleman. When she was Sarai is when she gave Abraham the suggestion that he should go into Hagar and bring forth the kid, because the promised seed and her ever bringing forth the kid wasn't going to happen. She wasn't going to be the one to bring it forth. So maybe you should go into my handmaid. But what we see is that wasn't actually Sarah. That was Abraham in his own wisdom or the lust of his flesh. See, remember, she's representing the dualistic principle. So first, as Sarai, she's the wisdom of Abraham's flesh. She's representing the lust of his flesh. This is Abraham in his own wisdom saying to himself that this is what he should do, go in unto Hagar. So this is why you see Sarah giving Abraham the suggestion that he should do it, almost leading him into doing it, just like we saw Eve, which was representing the lust of Adam's flesh, right? That desire to partake in that fruit. And it said that Eve ate the fruit and then gave it to her husband because that was his flesh. That was the lust of his flesh that took over. So going back to Sarah now, when she made that suggestion, she represented the lust of Abraham's flesh. Now, when the Most High called a blessing upon Abram, when he called a blessing upon Abram and his name was changed to Abraham, his wife's name, Sarah, was changed, or Sarai was changed to Sarah. And Sarah goes back to H8283 and H8282, Sarah, and it means queen. So before, she just represented a carnal type of ruler, right? A governor, nobleman, chief ruler. But once the blessing was called upon her, she represented the queen. Why? Because now she's representing the wisdom from above, also known as the spirit of wisdom, the Holy Spirit, the queen, the feminine principle that exists with the Father, right? So this is the queen, or which was later corrupted into the queen of heaven, and they started to worship Sarah in the form of Asherah, right? The queen of heaven. But now she's representing the wisdom from above. And so I want to take you back also and show you Israel, because now this is going to show you uh, the seed of the woman, right? So now we see the name Israel, H3478, and it traces to H8280, Sarah, right? So Israel will be Sarah and H14L, Sarah-el or Sarah-el. These are the children, the sons of God, right? Which means that the queen will be their mother. So Sarah is the mother. She's the queen. She represents the feminine principle, the Holy Spirit that exists with the Father. And this is where the name Israel is derived from, Sarah and El. Sarah and El. Or the feminine and the masculine principle together, creating Yasha'Allah, or Israel, Prince of the Power, which are the sons of God. So now let's go to Rebekah. Now Rebekah represents Jacob's wisdom, because Rebekah is Jacob's mother. And again, it is the mother's job to raise up the son and guide him until he is in the image, the full-grown image of his father, which would make him the son of God, or in the image of a Christ. Now Rebekah, when looking up her name, it corresponds to H7259, Rebekah. And that is a play on rib. She is the rib. She's representing that feminine principle that was taken from man in the form of a rib, which actually was symbolic to the staff. And so when you go to Genesis 24 chapter 67 verse, we see that after Sarah, which was Isaac's mother, after Sarah passed away, Rebekah was Isaac's comforter, right? And we know that the comforter is another name for the Holy Spirit. Genesis 25:28, it says that Isaac loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. We'll go to Malachi, the first chapter, second verse. Was not Esau Jacob's brother, said the Lord, yet I love Jacob. And so here we have the Lord saying that he loved Jacob, just like Rebekah said she loved Jacob, because she's representing the voice of the Most High. Her and the Most High are working together. They're one and the same, but she's the feminine principle speaking, which is showing that she's representing the spirit from above, the wisdom from above. If you go to the book of Romans, 9th chapter, 13th verse, as it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated, right? Because, okay, Isaac loved Esau because Isaac represented the material. He represented the masculine principle, the carnal. So he loved Esau because Esau was carnal. So this is why Jacob loved Isaac loved Esau. And Rebekah loved Jacob because Rebekah represented the spirit. She represented the Holy Spirit, the spirit of wisdom. And she represented the rib, which was the staff. And Jacob would come in the line of the shepherds, or the line of the Son of God. And so he was chosen by his mother, right? And so this is when we see Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated. It was because Jacob represented the spiritual child, Esau represented the carnal child. But I'm just showing that Rebekah and the Most High both saying the same thing, because Rebekah is representing the voice of the Most High, or the wisdom of the Most High. Genesis 27 chapter verses 5 through 8, you see Rebekah coaching Jacob into taking his brother's blessing. See, often you hear people say that it was Jacob who stole Esau's blessing, and Jacob stole the birthright. But it was actually Rebekah who coached him and showed him how to do it. It was her idea. Actually, Jacob said he didn't want to do it because if his father found out, he would curse him. And his mother said, if he find out, then your curse be on me. So it was actually, Rebekah was the wisdom behind Jacob getting that blessing. And it wasn't Jacob stealing it, as people say, but it was Jacob was being led by Rebekah, or the rib, or the feminine principle, the Holy Spirit, the spirit of wisdom. Now, Jacob had two wives, right? And again, it is either before we seen the name changes. Now with Rebekah, it was different, but we seen with because she had two sons, and so that's where the dualistic principle came in. That with Eve, she had Cain and Abel, which was the dualistic principle. But we also saw her name EVE and AVA, and then you have Sarah, which had the dualistic names, and now you have Jacob with his two wives, and one wife represent the first covenant, which is carnal wisdom, and then the second wife represent the wisdom from above. But let's deal with the first wife. Well, let's deal with Rachel. And so Rachel corresponds to H7354 and H7353 Raquel, and her name means ewe. Now, a ewe is a female sheep. And when you go to Genesis, the 29th chapter, the 6th verse, it said that when Jacob went out to go meet her, she was out with her father's sheep. She was out keeping her father's sheep, which falls in line with the shepherd and with the lineage of the shepherds or the sons of God, right? So now I want to point something else out to show that Rachel represents wisdom from above. Now in Genesis, the first chapter, 8th verse, you see that the Most High created a firmament, and the firmament was called heaven. Now, when you look at that word firmament, it traces to H7549 Rakia. So Raquel is a play on Rakia because the Rakia is the firmament, which is heaven, and also within the firmament, the Most High put the sun, moon, the stars. So the firmament was the place where illumination dwelt, right? So the Rakia or the Raquel, Rachel, represent wisdom from above or the wisdom of heaven of the firmament, where the lights or the illumination from above exists. Now, I also want you to notice that Rachel is also a barren woman. She came in the line of the barren woman. Why? Because her son would have to be a promised seed, right? There would have to be a blessing upon her. An angel or someone would have to come and say, hey, at this time, you know, you're going to bring forth the child, the promised seed, the son of promise. These children, again, when a woman is barren, she can't bring forth the child. The sorrow and the conception that was placed on Eve when she fell and became Ava. But it also lines up with these children are not born by the will of the flesh. Every one of these barren women who are bringing forth children, this is symbolic of the Holy Spirit bringing forth a Christ, because this child is not born from the will of the flesh. Man couldn't get her pregnant, right? They were barren. When Abraham was trying to bring forth the seed with Sarah, he couldn't do it. He didn't have the power in his own flesh. Man couldn't bring forth the son. It had to be a son of promise, which means that son was born of the spirit. Man had nothing to do with it. And so this is another play on the barren woman. And this is what Rachel represented. But you also had the oldest sister, which came first, which was Leah. Now, Leah traces to H3812 and H3811, La'ah, because Leah represents the law, the first covenant, and it means weary and faint. Now, when you go to Hebrews 8:13, it says the first covenant is old, decaying, and ready to vanish away. That's why her name means weary and faint, because she represents the first covenant that's old and ready to vanish away. It's faint, it's decaying, right? Now, when you go to Genesis 29th chapter, 17th verse, it also states that Leah was tender-eyed. Okay, we understand that the law represents a shadow of things to come. Hebrews chapter 10 verse 1, the law being a shadow of things to come. A shadow is the outlining of a thing. It is the image of a thing, but it doesn't have any detail. And this is what the law represented. It represented an image of the truth, an outline of the truth, but it wasn't in detail. It was a shadow. The vision wasn't really good, right? Tender-eyed. It also said that Romans the 11th chapter 25th verse, I would not have you ignorant of this mystery, that blindness in part has happened to Israel. The blindness in part meaning that you only can see half and half. You only have half the truth. And this was part of what pushed Israel into blindness, because they was given a carnal law. And it wasn't until the Messiah came and made that law whole by bringing the spiritual understanding of that carnal law and making it complete. Oh, now I see, right? He brought the illumination, the spirit, to bring forth the light and expose what was hid in the shadow. But this is why Leah have a tender eye, because she represents the law, which is only half sighted. It's only a half version of the full truth. Um, Also, Leah is the mother of Levi, Judah, and Dinah. Now we know Levi and Judah represent the southern kingdom, and they were the ones to uh, they would be the possessors of the law, right? The Levites are the priests. Judah was where the line of the kings came from, but these were the ones who took the law and they pushed the carnal aspect of the law. This was their mother. This was their wisdom, right? So of course they would be the ones to build up on their mother's wisdom and push their mother's wisdom. And so they were the sons of Leah, or the sons of the law, Levi and Judah. And you also have Dinah. Now, Dinah's name means judgment, right? It's like the feminine version of Dan, to judge. So Dinah traces H 1783, 1779, and 1777, and it basically means judgment. And Dinah was the daughter of Leah, or the law, and Jacob. So when Jacob was joined to his wife, they brought forth a child, and it was Dinah. Or in other words, when Jacob was joined to the law, Leah, the law, when Jacob was joined to the law, he brought forth judges, right? In the nation of Israel, the house of Jacob was ruled by judges before there was a monarchy, before there was a king, before there was any nation that was established. They were ruled by judges. This was the first form of wisdom that ruled over the nation of Israel, the wisdom of the judges. And when you look in the book of Judges, that's pretty much what it's showing. And so when you go to Genesis, the 34th chapter, you will see a parable play out. But, this it's not what we've been told this entire time. Now, I don't have it in front of me right now, but when you go to Genesis, the 34th chapter, you hear about Shechem. And he was a prince of the Hivites, which were basically Canaanites. But he took Dinah and laid with her, and he went to Jacob and asked if he could have Dinah's hand in marriage, and if they could join each other. You give us your sons, we give you our daughters, and we become one nation. And her brothers, Levi and Simeon, went and took it upon themselves to tell Shechem and everyone in Shechem's house that in order to be joined to their nation, that they had to be circumcised. And when they were circumcised, a couple of days later, the brothers went back and, destroyed everybody up in there. And they told their father, what, we supposed to let him treat our sister like a whore. Now, here's wisdom. That entire story in Genesis, the 34th chapter, Shechem represent the nations. They represent the Gentiles, right? Shechem and his people, they represent the Gentiles. And they're looking to be grafted in or be joined into the nation of Israel. They want to enter into a covenant, or enter into the covenant of the nation of Israel. And they want to be joined to the law, statutes, commandments, and judgments. He want to be married to Dinah, or this is the Gentiles seeking to be joined to the house of Jacob and to be joined to their wisdom, which is their law, statutes, commandments, and judgments. And now you have Levi, which represent the priests, coming out telling the Gentiles, or telling Shechem and them, that in order to be joined to us, in order for you to be a part of our nation, you have to be circumcised. And you see this whole entire story played out in the New Testament. And this is what Paul was trying to tell the Galatians. And he was saying throughout the New Testament that there's no being circumcised is not going to do anything for you spiritually. It's not going to save you per se. Like you can't. That have nothing to do with it. And this is what he meant when he was talking about those of the circumcision who was trying to compel them to go and be circumcised. And he was saying that they was doing it so that they could make you like under them, right? That they was trying to make you out into merchandise. And this is what that parable is about. So when we see Shechem taking hold to her, right? It said that he forced her. Again, when I was telling you about the three types of women, and you have the whore, the exoteric religion. See, anybody can just grab hold to it and be a part of it, and there don't have to be any covenant involved. And this is why the brother said, "What should we let them treat our sister like a whore?" Because they was like, "This ain't no religion. Like, if you want to be a part of the nation of Israel, you can't just come join in because you want to. You have to be initiated in, right?" And so this is what is taking place. You have the Gentiles, which is represented by Shechem in them, looking to be joined to the wisdom of the Israelites, which is represented by Dinah, and they're grabbing hold to it as if it's a religion without going through any initiation. And you have the priests, which is represented by Levi and Simeon, going to the Gentiles or to Shechem and them, saying, in order to be down with us, you got to be circumcised. And when they went in and destroyed them with the sword, this is symbolic of the priest making merchandise. Once you get circumcised, now you have to start going to the temple. You have to start paying your tithes. Like, there's a lot that go along with it. And that's what he was saying. Once y'all go and go get circumcised, now you're going to be compelled to, like, you belong to them now. Like, you're going to have to be a part of this whole thing. And so this is what that whole Genesis, the 34th chapter, is about. It's in line with the women of the Bible representing the feminine principle, representing wisdom,